Hello everyone, welcome to yet another Cave Diver React. My name is Gus.
Hi everybody, this is Woody.
And today,
and
L, that's right. Today we're going to be talking about a super fun video that somebody recommended. We will be talking about the, theoretical limits of how deep humans can dive. Because you and I, Woody, we love diving deep, right? I think you've been way deeper than me. What's your max depth, by the way, so far? Do you remember?
Close to 400 feet. I don't go beyond that. Typically, I want to keep it to 100 meters, which is roughly 330 feet.
Yep, and my deepest dive is 248 so far off the coast of South Florida on one of the wrecks there. And this video talks about, theoretically, how deep can we go? Because, again, when we dive rebreathers with special gas mixes, and they'll get into that. But there are people out there that have been way deeper than us, and they're going to talk about that. So I don't know if we're going to have a whole lot to react to, maybe correct some things here and there, but I think it's going to be a fun video for us to talk about.
I happen to love the science of diving. By the way, everybody, I'm on coffee.
Obviously.
So, and I want to tell you all one more thing. Do you know I have a keyboard now where I can pause the video? So those who said don't pause too much, I got controls finally. Threat. But we won't be talking over the video, and that's very important. But I love the science of diving, and I actually think this does a really good job to our non-divers especially of helping explain some basic concepts so you better understand either videos you've watched in the past or future videos of ours. So we won't over pause,
right?
But we will at times, Gus, need to add some commentary more about how does this apply to what we're doing, sort of a practical application of it rather than just the actual science of it that the video will talk, okay? I think it's a fair way that we'll discuss this
we
video.
do get a ton of questions about this, right? Why can you just come up whenever, or why can you just come up super fast? And, what is nitrogen narcosis? Is that the same as the bends? And, I think this video might do a good job explaining that. Maybe we'll just add some clarity, but let's just get started and see how it goes.
Great.
Mankind is the upright ape, evolved perfectly for walking and running on land. But we also have some evolutionary features that allow us to enjoy a dip in the ocean. And as we've advanced as a species, we've invented complex technology to take us deep into the oceans. But take away all this, and how far can we go without a big submersible to protect us? What's the lowest depth humans can survive?
I'm Stu, this is Debunked, where we talk the truths from the myths and the facts from the misconceptions.
Deep-sea diving has many dangers, and I don't just mean sharks and harpoon-wielding Bond villains. The effects of water pressure are the biggest challenge to the human body.
I had to stop it. Why? Sharks aren't dangerous to divers. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I had to. I can't hear that in a video.
Sitting on your boat at sea level, the air pressure is 1 atmosphere, to which your body is comfortably adapted. But just 33 feet, 10 meters underwater, the pressure is 2 atmospheres. With only this 1 additional atmosphere of pressure, your lungs will collapse by half. And
actually, I want to stop it there because we did get some comments on the video that we did about Pioneer Poly where he had an issue. He lost his regulator right at 10 feet, I think he was. And instead of going for his alternate regulator, he tried to surface right away. And, we kind of mentioned, like, that's not what he should have done. He should have really just gone for his alternate regulator rather than trying to surface, right from 10 feet. And people ask, but why? Why not just come from the bottom to the top? And the reason for that is that he was breathing from compressed air at 10 feet. And as you can see, the biggest change in pressure happens from the surface to, I guess in this case, 33 feet, in which the amount of pressure doubles. It goes from 1 atmosphere to 2 atmospheres, so you can see in this graph. And of course, if you go instead of 33 feet, you go to 10 or 11, whatever he was. That's a big change as well on atmosphere from 1 to 1.3. So if he's breathing a gas that is 30% compressed and he tries to surface by holding his breath, his lungs can expand 30% as well, and he could have had an overexpansion injury in his lungs if he held his breath. So if he was releasing air and he tried to surface from 10 feet, he could have avoided that, but he was panicking. So if he tried to hold his breath with full lungs and try to surface, he could have actually injured himself way worse. So the actual solution to losing his regulator was to switch to an alternate, and he didn't have to panic at all.
Well said.
The pressure increases by 1 atmosphere for every additional 33 feet, 10 meters, you dive. This increased pressure can lead to several problems in the human body, which is not well adapted to underwater conditions, regardless of the gear you're wearing. You might suffer barotrauma, as the water pressure squeezes the air pockets inside you and ruptures your eardrums, or bursts the air sacs in your lungs. If air bubbles get into your blood, you might suffer an embolism, causing a heart attack or stroke. Bad enough on land, even worse when you're 100 feet underwater. Alternatively, you might experience the rapture of the deep, or less poetically, nitrogen narcosis. This happens because higher pressures allow your body to absorb more nitrogen, which makes up 78% of the air we breathe. If you breathe too much nitrogen, you'll feel a little drunk. At 328 feet, around 100 meters deep, you could pass out.
Wow, he made a big jump there.
I was
just
getting
a
ready
quick
to hit the pause button at the same time. So go ahead, and then I want to clarify a lot that just went through.
Yeah, I'll just let you clarify on that. But I'm just going to go back a few seconds where he said the air is made of 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, and there's about 1% of other gases there. I just want to say something interesting that I hear, especially when you go to car dealerships and they offer to fill your tanks with nitrogen, and they are like, would you like to, us to, as an extra, like they'll charge you extra to fill your tires with nitrogen, as opposed to what? Because it's already almost 80% nitrogen in the tires, except for 100%. So they make it sound like, you don't really have nitrogen in the tires, and they're going to charge you extra to give you nitrogen. It's to go from 80 to 100%. It's not, that big of a difference. But anyway, I knew you were going to go into the science, so I'm staying away from that. So go ahead.
All right, well, I'm going to go into the science because I want to clarify it. I know, look, I've been teaching for years, and I know when people that are non-divers first hear all of what was just said, if I went back and asked you to explain what was just said, they're not going to be able to do it, okay? Because that was a lot. Divers, you're watching what was just said, and it totally makes sense. I'm talking right now to the non-divers. Let me help you. This will clarify it greatly. There is a couple of factors that we have to be aware of as divers. Number one, we have to always breathe. That's easy. We can't hold our breath because when we come up, the air will expand and could rupture the lungs. End of that conversation. Number two, what they're talking about here is as you go deeper, the nitrogen that we're breathing in the air, which is roughly 79%, is compressing into 16 theoretical tissue compartments in your body. It's the pressure pushing it into those various different tissue compartments. Now, when you come back up, those bubbles come out of those 16 different tissue compartments at various speeds because the bubbles are now uncompressing and expanding. That's why we have to go slow. That's why we may have to stop to allow our body and our lungs to take those expanding bubbles and get them out of the various tissue compartments. And each one of those tissue compartments off gases or gets rid of that gas at different speeds. End of that discussion. We don't need to go further into that in this video. Finally, the third thing that they're talking about that we have to be aware of as divers, which they talked about here, is what is called nitrogen narcosis. Now, there is no definitive proof that the oxygen is also not narcotic. So let's just say that the gas that we are breathing, if it's a mixture of regular air, can under pressure start to turn narcotic. Well, the word narcotic means it has an effect on the brain. And there's a whole science behind why that happens beyond this discussion. But that's the third thing we have to be aware of. Are we past a depth to where our brain is functioning clearly and properly? Well, why is that important? Because we have to look at our gauges. And what if there's a problem and we have to deal with it? Is our brain going to be able to process that information? I know I took a minute to explain that, but it will now make the rest of this video so much easier to understand, because now you know the 3 things that in general divers are always having to be aware of. And I say this exact same little mini lecture in my Science of Dive classes. So now let's let the video run, and it's going to make way more sense.
Shallower depths, you might do stupid things like try to breathe without your regulator, or rise to the surface too quickly, which can lead to decompression sickness, also known as the bends. Rising at the right rate allows your lungs to expel all that extra nitrogen your body absorbs at higher pressure. If you rise too fast, the gases will expand suddenly, like opening a fizzy drink. These bubbles can cause joint pains, nerve damage, paralysis, or if the bubble gets into your brain, death. To mitigate these dangers, scuba divers must be properly trained, and scuba tanks often contain a special mix of compressed air that is up to 36% oxygen. And just to be sure, the recommended safe limit for diving is no more than 130 feet or 39 meters deep.
Go ahead, because I was going to hit the same button there. You can talk first. That's funny how we're probably thinking alike. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what he was talking about when it comes to mixing gas is he was talking about a gas known as nitrox. And you've heard that before, that name before probably. But nitrox is basically any gas that has a higher concentration of oxygen than regular air, which is 21%, as we established before. And he mentioned that it typically goes up to 36%, but actually when you take the class, you normally get trained up to 40% nitrox. Now what happens is, and we talked about this in other videos before, is that depending on the concentration of oxygen you're breathing, oxygen is actually toxic based on your depth. Like 100% oxygen, for example, is toxic beyond 20 feet or 6 meters. So if you have 40% oxygen, in your mix, on the mix that you're breathing, you cannot go as deep as if you had 21% oxygen, for example, because you have less oxygen to deal with and you have, more leeway onto how deep you can go. So he was talking about, for example, having a tank or a cylinder that has up to 36% oxygen. And he says recommend that you don't go past 130. Actually, if you have 36% oxygen and you go to 130, you're probably going to be, poisoned at that point, right? You're going to have oxygen toxicity because the recommended bottom for 32, for example, not even 36, is 111 feet. That is the maximum depth, operating depth for nitrox 32. So 36 is even shallower than that. So 130 is too deep for that mix, and 40 is even shallower. So you don't want to go to 130 when you are diving nitrox of any of the recommended ones, like 32, 36, or 40, or anything like that. You have anything to add?
I'll just summarize it. It was perfectly well said. So the fourth thing, which Gus just discussed, is if you're adding an additional amount of pure oxygen into the mix, now we have to be careful because due to central nervous system issues, CNS issues, the oxygen can potentially damage you under pressure. It can cause convulsion or it can have long-term pulmonary effects. So we have to be concerned about that. But what it does help with is it allows you to stay deeper for longer as compared to regular air, because the oxygen is taking up more of the tissue. So expansion of the nitrogen is less. There's simply less percentage of nitrogen to expand out of those tissues. So it's a balance. Add more oxygen, you get less depth. You can't go as deep, but you get less bent. In other words, you get less prone to being bent, less bubble expansion of the nitrogen.
Right.
Okay? Now, there is nothing proving, though, that it helps with narcosis. That's the fourth leg, so we've introduced another element now. I know I'm repeating, but I wanted to summarize it.
That's right. And what Woody's talking about, it allows you to stay down for longer. He's talking about allows you to stay down for longer within a no decompression dive, meaning you don't have to have decompression stops. So typically, all of the dives that you make within as a recreational diver are no decompression dives, meaning you don't have any mandatory decompression stops. If you breathe nitrox, your no decompression time limits are increased, but your depth decreases. As you mentioned, your dives have to be shallower, but you can stay down for longer.
Scuba gear and carefully diving can help you avoid these nasty conditions. But what if you don't have any gear? How deep can you dive just holding your breath?
Oh yeah.
Diving this way is called freediving, and humans can do pretty well without an oxygen tank, thanks to a perk of evolution called the mammalian diving reflex. This is triggered by holding your breath and wetting receptors in your nostrils. Basically, when you submerge your face in cold water, your body goes into diving mode. This reflex triggers several physiological changes. The first, bradycardia, reduces the rate at which your body consumes oxygen by slowing your heart rate by 10 to 25%. Some professional freedivers can slow their hearts to only 14 beats per minute. That's 3 times slower than a person in a coma. The mammalian diving reflex also lowers your blood pressure, which allows for peripheral vasoconstriction, the constriction of blood vessels in your limbs. This moves oxygenated blood towards the important organs like the heart, the brain, and in particular, blood shifts to the lungs to expand the vessels and balance out the pressure from the water. Despite our mammalian diving reflex superpower, freediving is one of the most dangerous sports on Earth, with a long list of fatalities to back this up. And no limits freediving is widely considered the most dangerous form of freediving. This sees you strapped to a weighted diving sled attached to a rope, before you're plummeted to record-breaking depths within a couple of minutes. In 1949, scientists claimed that it would be impossible to dive deeper than 100 to 130 feet, or 30 to 40 meters deep, without your lungs fatally collapsing. During the 19th century, this is the depth pearl hunters would dive on a single breath to gather oysters and mussels to extract pearls. But in 2007, Herbert Nietzsche smashed through this limit 7-fold by plunging all the way down to over 700 feet or 214 meters. This is deeper than some World War II U-boats could go before they collapsed. The water would press down with a force of around 308 pounds per square inch.
I want to stop there. I have nothing to comment on freediving. I'm not a freediver.
I do.
I have nothing but respect for these guys. But, one of the biggest misconceptions non-divers have about diving is how much pressure the water puts on you. All right. And one of the things I didn't know until I became a diver is that there really isn't any pressure the water puts on your tissues that are not air, basically. Your lungs, your ear, your sinuses. I feel no pressure at 10 feet or 100 feet or 200 feet or 250 feet. You don't feel any difference at all on any depth because the water pressure doesn't apply to your liquid or whatever is blood, bones, anything like that. It doesn't feel at all different. So like this guy is at whatever 700 and something feet. He doesn't feel like there's an elephant collapsing his body. Like the weight of the water has no effect on his body, only on the compartments of his body that contain air, like his lungs, his sinuses, and his ears. And we use special techniques that you learn on like scuba class lesson number 1, which are called equalization techniques. We equalize in order to get over the pressure that you feel on your sinuses and your ears. And we breathe underwater to equalize our lungs.
Yeah, that's well said. I am a free dive instructor. I used to do a massive amount of free diving. So what we did is what you do as a free diver is you're basically training to overcome the reflux that the carbon dioxide buildup in your body is telling your brain to breathe. You're not breathing because you need more oxygen. Your reflux or urge to breathe is because carbon dioxide triggers your brain to inhale. There are breathing techniques that you use to overcome this, and it takes practice. The more you do it, the better you get. This is what, though, is fascinating. Why can a breath holder at the surface go all the way down, and they've gone much deeper than what this video has discussed, and come all the way up holding their breath, which we just told you is the number one rule of scuba diving, don't hold your breath. But in free diving, no, you have to hold your breath.
It's the only way.
And you can hold your breath from 1,000+ feet underwater, these free divers have reached. Why? Why can they hold their breath and not explode? So, I'm going to explain it as simple as I can. The air that they're breathing before they go down was not compressed. It's basically the air in the open atmosphere. So that as they're going down, that air is getting compressed, just like for a diver, but it's getting compressed relative to the lungs squeezing and compressing as well. So when they go back up, the expansion of that air, because it is expanding, is exactly relative to the expansion of the lungs. So the air that they breathe is not expanding bigger than the lungs. Because when you breathe underwater on scuba, you just took a breath of purely compressed air. Now, if you go up, that's going to expand far beyond greater than your lungs are expanding. So it's relative for a breath holder. It's just that simple.
Yep.
The other thing they have to be worried about, free divers, very, very difficult, is something called shallow water blackout. How do I explain this simply? When they are going up, the partial pressure of oxygen in their body is decreasing. And that can cause them to feel hypoxic and pass out at the surface. And that's how you set a record. You have to be able to make it to the surface and not pass out. Okay, it's a really bit more of a complex conversation, but I wanted to add that to the free diving because I think it's important to understand that.
Yeah, and that is a cool experiment. If you have like a swimming pool, you can take a balloon and take it all the way to the bottom, and you see the balloon get smaller, or a ball of some kind. Like, we used to do it with water polo balls. We take them to the bottom of like the diving pool. It was a feat of strength because you have to swim all the way to the bottom. It's a super deep pool, and you can see the ball gets all like, it loses the air. The Adventures with a Purpose YouTube channel did a really cool experiment. They took these balloon animals and they lowered them down to like the bottom of this river, super deep river, and they recorded the whole thing, and these balloon animals get like all deflated, and then they bring them back up and the balloon animals get inflated back on. It's pretty cool stuff. You should check it out. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So the lungs start full, they go to the bottom, they're like peanuts, and then they come back up and they get full again.
Compressing your lungs to the size of tennis balls. In 2012, Herbert Nietzsche improved his record to 831 feet, or 253 meters. But
Yikes.
afterwards, he suffered serious decompression sickness. He went through months of rehabilitation and several brain strokes before recovering. Incredibly though, this may not be the limit. Author and journalist James Nestor and biophysician John Fitz-Clarke believe that Nietzsche's record is still a way off the maximum depth. Clarke's laboratory simulations suggest that the ultimate limit is actually close to 1,000 feet or 300 meters deep. That's more than 3 American football fields end to end, and the equivalent to climbing to the top of the Eiffel Tower underwater. even if you throw your scuba gear back on, it'll be tough to beat this predicted 1,000 feet limit, with the deepest ever recorded scuba dive coming in at 1,090 feet or 332 meters by Ahmed Gabur in the Red Sea in 2014. To help him reach this depth, he breathed a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen and helium to avoid the problems of nitrogen narcosis.
Had to stop it. I'm not going to go into a long dissertation here. One more thing, though, I have to add to this discussion, because for sure, right now, a non-diver says, I have no idea why that's important. They think about it from the perspective that you don't know anything. So what? They added helium. That's what he just said. What they mean by this is once you reach a certain depth when you're scuba diving, we breathe what's called a trimix. Tri means 3. So now, in our mixture of gases, we have some percentage of oxygen, nitrogen, and we add helium as the third gas. Why helium? It's just this simple. Helium is not narcotic, so you don't feel narked. You don't feel that silly feeling or that confused feeling in your brain from helium. And that's it. It's that simple. So when we keep talking in these technical videos about trimix and so forth, it's just that we want the helium in the mixture so we aren't out of our minds when we go to certain depths. And we plan around how much helium do we need to add to control how deep do we want our brain to feel we are. And that's the whole concept of trimix.
That's right. And trimix is awesome.
It is, and it's expensive, but it's awesome because you feel perfectly clear even below 100 feet.
Yeah. All right,
Keep on rolling.
Yeah, you stopped it.
However, breathing helium at high pressures has its own risks, including high-pressure neurological syndrome, which can cause nausea, sleeplessness, and involuntary muscle jerks. Not wanting to lose control of his limbs, Ahmed returned to the surface when symptoms of this syndrome started to show. The dive itself took just 12 minutes, but the dangers of decompression meant it took him 15 hours to safely return to the surface. The sheer length of time it takes to decompress is a problem for commercial divers, who need to spend hours working at great depths. In order to...
So notice they're breathing something called heliox, which is yet another gas that could be used for diving. So if you're playing with all these terms, trimix, nitrox, heliox, you probably figure out that heliox is a combination of helium and oxygen. So no nitrogen whatsoever. This is probably the most expensive way to dive because helium is expensive, oxygen is expensive. So this is typically what you see like in the military dives with heliox and in commercial applications, because again, nitrogen is an inert gas. It doesn't really help you. It just makes you narcotic. So if you remove it altogether, you're not losing anything. It's not like nutrients or something that you're missing out. Helium is also not really helping you, but it's just not giving you the narcotic effect. So by using heliox, you're getting the oxygen which your body needs, but you're not getting the narcotic effect. It's just expensive, right? That's why a lot of people don't dive with trimix, and you do need, a special training to learn what to do with trimix, because by adding helium, your oxygen content decreases in your bottle, and you can get pretty dangerous to having low oxygen content at the surface, right? When your pressure comes down, which can cause then having, low oxygen levels enough to support your consciousness at the level, not to keep it, let's not go super technical on that.
Low partial pressure of oxygen.
Exactly.
But one thing they did say that was very interesting. I bet a lot of people were like, wow, once you hit those kind of depths, I mean, the guy is at 1,000 feet underwater.
1,000 feet. That's bananas.
Listen, we talked about this in the David Shaw follow-up video. For every minute that David Shaw was at roughly 800 feet, every minute added 1 hour of decompression time. Meaning, he's only down there for a minute, but he's not going to be able to come to the surface, and he'll have to wait 1 more hour per minute. That's how fragile our little baby human bodies are to the effects of expanding gas out of our tissues. Really, right?
Yep.
I mean, we're
This
really
guy-
fragile.
This guy did 12 minutes, 15 hours of deco.
Think about that, because he's at 1,000 feet. So that 12 minutes added,
Yeah.
15 hours. Anyway, it's very interesting that, again, that's related to the bends. We have to go that slow to let those bubbles slowly expand out of the tissues, funnel into our lungs so we can off-gas the bubbles out of our body.
But it's also a compounding effect because I assume some of those stops are like 400 and stuff,
Oh,
which
yeah.
you're still getting deco at
I
that
know.
time. Because it's funny because when you do the recreational diving stuff, the deep diving class teaches you to dive up to 130. But when we do our deep dives, which again, compared with these guys are not deep, right? But when we do like full trimix dives to 300 or whatever, some of our stops are like a 150, which are deeper than the deep dives for recreational divers. So it's all relative. When people think you're at a deep dive of 130, 40 meters, like that is deep. I mean, we passed by 130. We still have 200 to go. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all relative with these guys too. I mean, for us, 330 is a lot. These guys are doing their first stop at 400, 500 feet. It's insane.
And
right? It's always a higher level.
and to complicate it more, the helium, although amazing for not making you feel narked, there is something called the helium penalty. It bubbles faster. It's a lighter gas than all the other gases. So now, yeah, I'm not as narked, but I have more bubbling, so it's building up deco time faster. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
But I think what this illustrates, Gus, is this is why there's a need to take these classes. We go greatly into the dive planning aspects of diving deep when you take a deep diving class. And the deeper you go, the more planning there is involved. And this video does a good job of illustrating why. Okay, let's keep it rolling.
Yep.
To get around this, they use a technique called saturation diving. Often used by gas and oil industries, this is where the diver adjusts their body to deep water pressures in a high pressure chamber and uses it or a pressurized diving bell to travel to and from the ocean floor. With divers never actually leaving the pressurized environment, they don't need to spend days decompressing each time they need to return to the surface. They just return in the pod and continue living under the same pressure of the deep sea. And with decompression from saturation diving taking more than a day per 100 foot or 30 meters, you'd otherwise be looking at a lot of lost work hours.
I'm going to stop it here. It's interesting.
Awesome.
Now listen, this gets confused a lot, even by scuba diving pros and scuba divers. Saturation diving is not what we do as scuba divers. Saturation diving simply means this. All 16 of those theoretical tissue compartments have as much gas compressed into them that they can hold. There is no more room in those tissue compartments to compress more gas. They're fully saturated. At that point, 1 day per 100 foot is a decompression time. So these oil rig divers, they can't fully go down there, work for hours on the oil rig, and spend a whole day, right, coming back to the surface. I mean, that would be impossible. So they live in an environment that keeps them under that pressure. And then when it's finally done, whatever their 1 week mission is done, they'll slowly come up, typically inside of these environments. Because their tissue compartments are fully saturated and they have to come up that slow. We are all the rest of us. Everybody else are what is called bounce divers. We're diving down and we're basically bouncing and working our way back up far before our tissues are fully saturated.
That's right.
Nothing else to add there, but that is a clarification.
Yeah. And these guys are, like you said, fully saturated. They stay down there for weeks at a time. Even their emergency rafts are compressed or whatever, are under pressure in case like the whole like oil rig, catches fire or whatever, and they have to go into an emergency raft. It's compressed to that depth. so they can be safe, because they do something like a foot an hour or something like that when they're coming out of it. It takes them a week to deco out of it.
As such, saturation divers will live in a pressure chamber for up to 28 days at a time.
A whole month.
That's a long time to risk sickness from breathing nitrogen at high pressure. So saturation divers breathe a mix of oxygen and helium.
Not only does the helium help you pass the time with funny voices,
But it also comes in useful as it's rather good at conducting heat. And that's pretty important with the cold depths of the ocean hitting an average temperature of 3.8 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yikes.
But that's not enough to prevent them from suffering hypothermia. So saturation divers also usually have warm water pumped into the outer layer of their suits via an umbilical connected to the surface, keeping them nice and toasty at the bottom of the ocean. Divers can then simply swim around at depths that would otherwise crush them into oblivion.
So when we're diving as bounce divers, we don't want to fill our dry suits, for example, with helium because it's cold and it's expensive. That's all. Conducts heat quickly. It's colder gas.
In fact, in 1988, the deepest dive ever recorded saw a team of French commercial divers spend 6 days working at a depth of over 1,700 feet, or 534 meters, about 1.3 times the height of the Empire State Building, and deeper than the maximum diving depth of a blue whale. The water pressure was so high that their lungs were almost at zero capacity, and could barely function. So they breathed a special mixture, mostly comprised of the lightest gas known to man, hydrogen, and contained just 1% of that annoyingly heavy gas, oxygen. Whilst this is the deepest actual open water dive ever recorded, Comex followed this up in 1992 with an experiment in a hyperbaric research chamber.
Before they go into that, what's the lowest mix of oxygen you've had?
I breathed it was a 860 mix. 8% oxygen, 60% helium. Because at almost 400 feet, you
you
need
have
a
to be
lot of
pretty low.
helium or you're going to be out of your mind.
Yeah.
And you could do the math.
Yeah. I've been
Right.
1050. 1050 is the
1050,
lowest.
okay.
So you were 860.
860.
This guy's at a 1%.
Yeah. And think about it. Their
bananas.
lungs are almost squeezed down to a peanut, so they really can't hold much gas.
This is so gnarly.
Which is, there are, I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Abyss. I love it. It's where aliens came and they basically were able to breathe oxygenated
Yeah.
liquid. So no more air. They're literally breathing in the body liquid. And they are doing experiments where that works. Now, all your decompression, bubble expansion, or whatever is gone. I mean, who knows what depth we could go to. So technology could get us significantly deeper. One other thing, hydrogen. Why don't we use it all the time if it's so good? Well, you're basically like a bomb. I mean, it's very explosive, right? So this is not like something we want to be diving around with. Hey, I'm diving like almost pure hydrogen today. Well, don't get near me, Gus.
Well,
You
I
may
hope
blow
today
up.
you don't come up with your ideas of let's go and try hydrogen diving on
know
the
what?
next video.
You know, I did not think of that. That would be, we have
No,
to. We
dude.
must find a way.
Let's.
Okay,
let's
all
not.
right.
I don't even know. Where do we buy hydrogen without
No,
being
we're
on
gonna
a blacklist for the API?
All right, we're going to figure that out. And one other thing. You may not, I don't think you're going to love this.
Oh, no. What?
I think the aliens,
Oh, no. Yeah, for
they've
sure.
been here.
Oh, aliens for sure.
Aliens have been here.
They were
and
in
they've
one of our
already-
videos.
They've been underwater, and I mean, am I allowed to say again about the octopus that they probably are aliens?
No, let's not go
Okay, I
into
won't
that.
then. I'm not going to.
All right.
They are.
No, octopus are not
They
aliens.
have 8 brains.
Stop. People are going to unsubscribe. They're going to... All right.
All right, let's
Chamber, which proved humans can survive even deeper still, with one diver reaching a synthesized depth of 2,300 feet, or 701 meters. This record-breaking experiment required 24 days of decompression and a further 2.5 months of monitoring. If you'd like to know more about the limits of human survival, then let us know in the comments. But in the meantime...
All right, that's the end of that one. Wow, 24 days of decompression.
Unbelievable. You can't have anything go wrong.
Oh
Really,
my
you can't have anything
goodness.
go wrong when you're at full saturation like that. I mean, there's no like, well, I skipped my stops. I mean, you're at serious risk. Hey, I want to just add that I thought this was excellent. I really enjoyed this video.
That was really good.
I hope that you all did as well. I really think if you watch this, it will help you understand. That's Elle chiming in. She liked it as well. It will really help you understand a lot of our videos where we're talking about a lot of terminology. Some of you have commented that you don't like us stopping so often because we're stopping, and you're right. We're interrupting the video or the speaker, and it's like distracting because we have to explain those concepts over and over. And then many of you will be like, thank you for stopping because you did explain and I wouldn't have otherwise been able to follow the video. So we may refer people now going forward to this video in the future before watching some of our more technical videos.
Right.
Great suggestion, Gus.
And the other thing that this video does is that, you know, we've reviewed videos in the past from people that are not divers that create content like this that make, you know, horrific mistakes, right? They refer to all of the tanks as oxygen tanks and like they call the fins flippers and all of that stuff. I don't think the people that make this video are divers themselves, and they got pretty much everything right. I mean, they did a really good job researching it and covering the stuff. They did a great job talking about all of the technical terms. I mean, yeah, they made a couple of mistakes here talking about nitrox and whatnot, but other than that, I mean, they did a great job. So that was really fun.
So the summary of this entire video, we're going to figure out a way to dive with hydrogen.
No.
And that should
No.
be a future
No.
video,
No.
I think.
No.
We
No.
already got the gold. You said no, but that's a yes. Before you said no to we're not going to do a exploration, but Mike Young said I would do it with you, and then you said yes.
Well, yes, I did say that.
So I'm thinking
but-
if I bring somebody that you would feel really good about, you would say yes again to hydrogen.
Well, yeah, if Mike Young wants to dive with hydrogen, I might say yes.
Okay, we're doing.
That's true.
I'll be talking to Mike later.
But if you like this video, please go ahead and hit the like button. I've also noticed that a lot of people watching these videos have not subscribed to the video. They're missing out because we do have a lot of giveaways and we do release a lot of content for our members only and for our subscribers as well. So please go ahead and subscribe. Help us, grow this family, grow this channel, and share some more content with you guys. We're working on some amazing stuff. Woody and I are about to leave and have 10 days of some epic cave diving. Hopefully we can get some cool footage. Some of the highest level diving we've done. Yes. I mean, it's going to be pretty amazing. So we're going to get a ton of underwater content for you. I know that you've been asking for it. So please go ahead and subscribe, support the channel, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everybody.